Hello. It's very nice to welcome everybody who's here. My name's Dickon Bevington, and I'm one of the AMBIT people based at the Anna Freud National Centre for Children and Families. And I'm very, very pleased to welcome people to our monthly webinar, which is going to run for the next hour. We've got some wonderful, wonderful guests, well known to me. Just to introduce Catherine and Becky, they'll introduce themselves a little bit more when they come to speak, but using AMBIT in an educational setting is our theme for today. And I just wonder if James and Rebecca, you'd like to just say hi and what you're doing to help us rumble along.
Hello there. Hi, my name's James Fairbairn and I'm one of the AMBIT team at the Anna Freud Centre. And so I'm going to be manualising, I'm going to be making a kind of live record of the discussion and putting it into the AMBIT manual, which will then send around a link so people can read about it afterwards.
Fantastic, thank you.
And I'm Rebecca, one of the lead trainers from the AMBIT team, and my job today is to be your chat box monitor. So what we'd like you to do is put any questions, thoughts, share your curiosity in the chat box, and I'll do my best to monitor that. I might send you some links to the manual that James has just been referring to, and then we can make sure that any questions that you ask get put to our panelists. I'll probably turn my camera off after this, so I won't disturb the rest of the webinar.
Thanks. And we've also got Lydia and Sandra here, who are both supporting our sort of technical side. So we're really very grateful to them, because it all gets terribly scary to be running these things. At least it does still for me. So for those who aren't already Zoom kind of natives, the chat is down the bottom. I can see somebody's made a post, because a little number 1 is. So if you just wave your sort of cursor over your screen, you'll find a little sort of series of icons turn up. So there's chat, and then there's various other things. There's chat and Q&A, which I can never quite work out the difference, but I think people tend to put everything in the chat, but you can use either. So what I'm going to suggest is I'm going to talk for just sort of under 10 minutes, preferably quite a lot under 10 minutes, so I give plenty of time for Catherine and Becky to talk. But I'll just try and set the scene a little bit, and then Catherine and Becky will talk for about half an hour, 40 minutes, and then we'll have time at the end to do a bit of Q&A, we hope, after that. So I'm going to share my screen now, if that works. Let's go. Yes, brilliant. And we'll set off. What I'm not going to be able to do is to tell everybody everything about AMBIT, but I thought it would just be worth reminding ourselves that at the heart of AMBIT is this idea of mentalising. I'll say a little bit about that later. But another way of looking at AMBIT is, how do we adapt help to actually make it helpful? And whether that help comes in the form of therapy, housing, or education, or any of the other ways that we try to be helpful to human beings. It's how we adapt what's on offer to try and make it more helpful to the person we're trying to help is kind of at the heart of AMBIT. And that we think that this approach called mentalising, which is a way of making sense of human behaviour, I guess, is rather important that we practice that and help our clients or students or patients. We call them clients because we work with many different people in different settings, but helping them to do that and to doing that with them is pretty critical. But if we're not also working towards creating teams that help us to cope by helping to mentalise us, we're in trouble. And if we're not also trying to kind of mentalise the wider network of other workers, both formal, all the different agencies and different professionals that get involved with young people who perhaps have multiple needs, we're in trouble, and how to organise that. And then the final sort of part of the AMBIT, with this wheel that we try to sort of represent everything, is that actually mentalising has a lot to do with this word that is why today's particularly good, learning. That actually it's about trying to create teams and settings where there's a justification for setting a bit of time aside to sort of stop and reflect and then learn from what the evidence and our own experience might help us to adapt what we do so that it gets a little bit more effective, more helpful, if you like. So mentalising, it's a word that was developed, or really sort of came into sort of popular use in the 90s. It's been around for a lot longer, but that was when it became popular. And it was really purposefully from the beginning an integrative idea that pulls together understandings from all of the major fields of really making sense of human behaviour: cognitive behaviorism, systems theory, psychodynamic thinking, and more biological, social, ecological, and educational ideas. So that this idea that one lens for looking at human experience can potentially start to help us have a bit more of a common language. We're rather good at talking different languages of expertise, and mentalising is something that, if it's right, is deeply respectful, because it's not really anything new, but it's building on work that's been carried out in all of these different fields. So what does it look like when I'm mentalising? Well, I look a little bit like this little dog. I'm trying to look at the world from different perspectives, trying to put myself in the shoes of others, and if you like, if you could imagine it, putting myself in my own shoes in a way of reflecting on, why am I thinking that? What's going on? So I'm curious. It's not a state of reading minds. It's the opposite. It's knowing that I don't know what's in your mind, but that I'm curious, and that if I understood better, that'll be of value to me and of you. If I'm mentalising, I'm aware that if there's a really high temperature in the room, both myself and you are less likely to be able to make sense of each other effectively and accurately than if we're in a sort of relatively calm state. And of course, many of the settings that AMBIT is designed to be used in are not very calm often, and that's part of the kind of the reality of what we're trying to help people. When I'm mentalising, I'm kind of creating coherent narratives, a thread that would make sense of why I came to be saying and doing the things that I'm doing right now, both perhaps relating to the last 20 years or just the last 10 minutes. If I'm mentalising, I can make some sense of it. And the greatest and best thing about mentalising is that it's where all human humour, what Shakespeare describes as the comedy of errors, it's where humour comes from. It's hilarious, the fact that, you know, you and I can see the banana skin, but that other person can't see it. And what's best about that is that we can see that they can't see, and that's why it's utterly hilarious to think about somebody slipping on a banana skin. There are better jokes. Mentalising, therefore, is making sense, full stop. Yeah, that's what it's about. It's about making sense of behaviour, making sense of the words that come out of someone's mouth, what they do with their hands or their feet, and making sense of things on the basis of what's going on in their mind. What are their intentions? What are their hopes? What are their fears? What are their beliefs? Whether or not their beliefs are true or false doesn't matter. It might make sense of why the man punched me if he genuinely believed that I was about to stick a knife in him. In fact, I wasn't. I was about to get my checkbook out and write him a check or something. The other thing about mentalising that I think AMBIT is particularly keen on is that it's a social function. It's a measure, really, of our connectedness more generally. The mother starts to mentalise her infant before the infant's even born. She imagines the baby's mind. And when the baby's born, she looks at the baby and she gets a picture in the baby's mind that if the baby's lucky enough to have a mum that can mentalise, the baby starts to see his or her mind reflected in the mind of a trusted other. And that's how we develop our sense of self, and how we start to develop our sense of things and emotions being understandable. But how could a young mother do that if she was stuck in a kind of tower block like something like Grenfell, very deprived and without access to perhaps a partner who can compassionately imagine what she's going through, perhaps from a kind of visiting health visitor who could mentalise her from perhaps with a sort of, you know, a grandmother or just a family friend or someone. So our capacity to do this for others is intensely kind of connected to the availability of others who can do this of us to us. So it's a very much a network thing. And the other thing that I need you to know about mentalising is that we're not very good at doing it. So we're designed to stop mentalising if tigers appear, because mentalizing is slow, it's reflective, it's wondering, and that's of no survival value if a tiger comes. Where mentalizing in education particularly connects to is this experience that I think many of us who work in fields of sort of multiple needs have. And I know that Catherine has experience of this because she's worked with young people who've been perhaps out of education for a very long time, or whose relationship to education is very troubled. And where people often have this experience is that they've got a head full of helpful ideas, of knowledge, of ideas about what to do. And that it's not about pushing this door open in the young person's mind, that the key to opening that door is understanding. And how do I know if I've understood a young person? Well, there's only one measure. Does the young person feel understood? So it's a tricky one to measure that. But if I do get a picture of their mind, I get an understanding of, well, yeah, actually, you know, quadratic equations are really difficult, and there's about 39 different ways that I can misunderstand them. But one of the ways that I would get it wrong is this: if I can get a sense of the difficulty that the young person feels understood, that is what triggers this critical thing that happens in our minds that are by design. Evolution has made our minds kind of closed to learning, because I don't want my kids to learn from any old person. I want them to learn from the right person. So this door, what we would call epistemic hypervigilance, is a kind of closed, but it will open on the experience of someone else appearing to kind of get me. It's when people point at you and they go, that's what I'm talking about. Yes, that's how I've misunderstood that equation. That's how I got that spelling wrong. That's how I kind of, you know, feel, or whatever. When they point at you like that, normally they point a little bit upwards, not jabby pointing. When they point like that and their eyes often go up, that's what I'm talking about. That's when you create this ability for the door to open, and this, what we would call the epistemic hyperlink or superhighway opens up. And it's where the person starts to trust not just that, oh, I know that Dickon likes you kind of, you know, change signs if you're doing some mathematics equation. Dickon likes that. No, but that actually that knowledge in Dickon's head might be relating to the whole world, that he might have, there might be social value in what's in his head, not just stuff that he likes that was of no interest to me. So this is critical to what every good teacher kind of implicitly knows. And I suppose one of the things about mentalizing theory is that it tends to make things that are often used implicitly, just out of sight, it tends to make them explicit, and it helps us to, if you like, practice them in a more kind of purposeful way. So accurate mentalizing is the key to the door to learning, to open somebody's mind, to get their attention. And at that, I think I'm pretty much out of time. AMBIT, I talked about this idea of mentalizing being social. It promotes a kind of slightly different view of this kind of these professional teams that often gather around young people with multiple needs. Many people, including a teacher, might gather around. Now, a lot of the young people that we work with, and I know Catherine works with, they will struggle to make one good relationship. So asking them to make 5 or 6 with different professionals from different agencies, talking different languages, is probably going to push their capacity. AMBIT talks about this notion of a team around the worker. It's a complementary way of looking at exactly the same network of people. The question is, where is the epistemic trust? If I look at that network through the eyes of the young person, who do they experience as getting me? Because that person is exactly in the same position as the mountaineer in this picture. It's an exciting, a wonderful, privileged place to be, but it's also pretty scary. So the key thing, if you find yourself as that key worker, not as a role, as a kind of technical role, an official role, but just your key in the mind of the young person, if you're that person, you better work out who's holding your rope and how you communicate about your need to have a little bit more rope or for them to hold tight. And you better have some discipline about how you do that, just as much as you need all the skill as to how to actually do the climbing thing with your ice axes and your crampons and whatever. So what you do face to face is one thing, but how you're supported by a team and how you create a team that helps you when your mentalising inevitably wobbles, is what AMBIT is kind of all about. And at that point, I am going to relieve you all from me and invite Catherine and Becky to tell us what you're doing in education, because it's been my pleasure to work with you, Catherine, for many years in an adolescent inpatient unit that you ran the school in for a long time. Over to you.
Hello, I'm Catherine and this is the lovely Becky. And we, as Dickon has said, we've worked with Dickon for quite a long time. We've just left a Tier 4 inpatient education setting, and we've been really privileged to be able to be invited to set up our own initiative, which we've called Polaris, after the North Star, because we like to think that we are helping people find their way by being really a point of consistency, a relationship that they can rely on. So that's that lovely metaphor explained. We couldn't be teachers if we weren't going to use a metaphor. So we're our head at Newmarket Academy has been really very brave and very bold, and we must make sure that we thank him for taking on our approach, our vision, and letting us just roll with AMBIT for learning, and to have that as our key guiding principle. So the most important thing to say really is that we use AMBIT absolutely holistically. We use it to drive every part of every day. We use it to drive our curriculum, our relationship with parents, everything. And actually, even structurally, we use AMBIT, so we don't have a timetable. So every part of every day is built around mentalising. And we'll explain a little bit about why we do that in a moment. So we'll just tell you, Becky's going to tell you a little bit about the kinds of young people that we've got here. We hope, if the slide works, which, yay!
So we are a specialist provision attached to a mainstream school, and we work with 8 young people who all have EHCPs, which state that their main need is communication and interaction, attachment. Those are the 2 big ones. They also have, a lot of them have autism, and they're nearly all under CAMS and receive quite a lot of support through CAMS teams. A lot of them have been out of education for a long time. I mean, we have young people who haven't been in school since year 5 and they're now in year 11. So it's not just a few months, they have become completely disengaged from any form of education. And because of that, they feel stigmatized and they don't have a normal experience of what education is. So we exist to give them that. Yeah, some of them have been excluded from school, some have just flatly refused to go, but we work with them in a way which gives them an experience that's positive, and to rewire their neural pathways to know that school doesn't have to be a scary place where they are stigmatized. So that's who we work with.
Part of the ultimate aim, really, the idea of being on a mainstream site, is that we have the opportunity to give these young people their legal entitlement and human rights access to mainstream education. And that's the idea. The idea is that if we do this successfully and we rebuild those kids, then they will be able, in time and with support, to access education in a way that their peers do. And that gives them a really crucial normalizing peer experience, which is really important in terms of their sense of self and in terms of their life trajectory. We do, special schools do an absolutely amazing job, we know that, but there is also some evidence that longer term it can create some difficulties in terms of identity and in terms of integrating into the general population. And there's also a kind of meta-narrative which is about what we want to achieve as a society, which is that if we want an inclusive society, we need inclusive schools, because it's not just about our young people learning to manage in mainstream school, it's about those young people learning to integrate and to work with all kinds of different young people. If they don't experience young people with special needs or neurodiverse young people, then we're not ever going to move anything forward as a society. So there's a meta-narrative there. as well that we're trying to achieve. But obviously, it's only week 4. We'll get to changing the world next year. So I guess the big question is why we want to do AMBIT for learning. So predominantly, it's based on our experience. So Becky and I we were very highly influenced by Dickon and the work of the Anna Freud Centre and the brilliant people that we met at the Darwin that were also keen AMBITers. So James Fairbairn being an amazing advocate for AMBIT, and they really, we were so sold on their vision of AMBIT that we tried to use it in our school in the Tier 4 service with absolutely phenomenal success. But in some ways it's a safe environment to do that, because no one will question the need to do it with young people who are suicidal and who are in a Tier 4 service. So the big brave step is to say, well, actually it's not just beneficial for those young people, it's beneficial for all young people. And that's ultimately where we want to get to. But so our next step is to try to bring this into education through the young people that we're teaching on the side of a mainstream school. The long-term goal would then be to roll that out into the mainstream school, and ideally beyond that if we can. And our reasons for that, for AMBIT for learning, is that predominantly learning is an emotional and relational experience. People talk about their love of learning or their hate of learning. There are very few people you ever meet who are ambivalent about their school experience. It's polarizing, and it's relational. So learning, so as Becky said, our young people are completely disconnected from learning. They don't think it's for them. It's been something that's been done to them, not with them or by them. And it's been something that has been actually a stick to beat them with. It's been the thing that has made them feel, it's changed their relationship with themselves. And if we can get learning right, if we can use learning to be a transformative experience that connects young people to themselves, that connects young people to being open-minded, that connects young people to their culture, to their peers, then we really build something better, a better world for the young people and a better experience for them. And the other reason we like AMBIT for learning is that actually learning should be individual and it should be meaningful. And that starts with the young people having a mentalizing experience of themselves as learners, of what's meaningful to them, of mentalizing and learning about the way that they learn best, of mentalizing where they want to get to and what they'll need to get there. And AMBIT for us is a really powerful way of helping young people to think about what learning could mean to them, and also using mentalizing to think about why it's gone wrong in the past and where the blame for that lies, where the fault for that lies. Because young people will, and certainly all the young people that we work with at the Darwin and the ones we meet here, they don't blame anyone except themselves. Mm-hmm. They think that actually if everybody else can do this learning, and they see all their peers in school doing their learning, and then they start to believe that it's just them. It's just me that can't do it. I'm stupid, I'm rubbish, and so we use mentalizing to repair that relationship with learning and to challenge that idea about actually who they are in relation to that. And also for us, AMBIT is an amazing way of thinking about assessment for learning. So we're not just tracking our, where have you got to with, reading Blood Brothers, or, do you know all the different continents? I mean, that's part of it, but also mentalizing is really useful in terms of assessment for learning, because it makes us think about readiness for learning as well, and relationship to learning, relationship to peers, relationship to school, relationship to teachers, because those are all a really fundamental part of assessment for learning. Where is this person in terms of their ability to take risks? Where is this young person in terms of their ability to try something new, or to hear a new idea, or to even tolerate the idea of getting something wrong? Those are all crucial elements of assessment for learning, and mentalizing is a really important part of that. And the AMBIT part of assessment for learning is that the more people, the more opinions you can hear about a young person, the more full picture you have of them, and therefore the better able you are as a teacher to be able to think about what they might need next and what might move them forward. So that's about using the teachers and the staff that have those relationships with those young people to work in an AMBIT way as a team, to really flesh out a picture of a young person, to give you the best possible chance of putting a curriculum or a pedagogy in front of them that is going to make a difference to them. So in terms of, we use the theory, I guess, that we subscribe to that leads us to AMBIT type approaches. Well, the first one, with all of our young people, they have communication interaction difficulties. And as Becky says, that's a variety of reasons. Some of it's trauma, some of it's ADHD, some of it's autism, some of it's attachment, sometimes it's all four of those things. And for most of it, and what we know about communication and interaction is that it's absolutely fundamental for building any kind of relationship. And as we all know, our sense of self, our self-worth, our value, our identity is built around our relationships with people. And when those are disrupted and interrupted, it disrupts and interrupts a young person's ability to think about who they are, and they just end up with a one-dimensional version of who they are, which is the version they put in their head, which is why if they've had failed school experiences, we need to think about how we rebuild that young person, and that's got to be through relationships and through learning to communicate. And part of the reason we feel so strongly about that is that one of the things we know it, our evidence base from, you know, working with people with psychosis or people with dementia, is that people very quickly become dehumanized because that communication is interrupted and disrupted, and it stops us having a human-to-human connection. And certainly for a lot of our young people, their relationships with teachers in schools have broken down very, very quickly. And we were just talking to one this morning, actually, who was saying that every single time she went into school because she thought that the teachers would be the people who would understand, who would be clever enough or educated enough to be able to see how hard things were for her. But actually, they just said, we can't manage this level of distress, and sent her home. And how really damaging that was for her, because it further stigmatized her. It made her feel like, good grief, I am so alien to everybody. I am so different that not even these teachers can get me. So what hope do I have? And I think as teachers, we do hold a huge responsibility. We are the people, second really to parents, that spend that much time with those young people, and who are really sort of cast in the mold of mum and dad. And actually we have a legal duty of in loco parentis. So we need to think, so I think it's really important to think about the response we give to young people. And on that basis, we subscribe to really the double empathy theory, which is really that there's a lot of sort of a school of thought about young people, particularly with autism, that they lack a theory of mind, that they can't empathize. And actually the more progressive research thinks about that as a two-way flow, that that's not just that young people, neurodiverse young people, fail to understand and to mentalize other people, but that neurotypical people simultaneously fail to mentalize accurately neurodiverse young people. And then we end up in this double bind, this double empathy issue, which is that how can a young person who might struggle to empathize and mentalize themselves learn to do that if the people around them can't do that to them? And so what we're trying to do here is a completely immersive mentalizing experience of at all times of the day, with the idea that if we want these young people to be able to mentalize themselves and mentalize each other, then that starts with us, and we've got to be able to mentalize them. And that comes from getting to know them as quickly as we possibly can, spending as much time with them as we can, having opening up all kinds of different opportunities. So not just sitting behind a desk, but that, you know, we go to the park every day so we can see them in different environments. We go to the woods, we all have lunch together, we pet the guinea pigs, and, you know, we play catch, we throw balls about, we do jigsaws, we do whatever we need to do to have that engages and opens up an opportunity for us to get to know that young person, so we can accurately learn to mentalize them, so they can learn to do it for themselves. We also subscribe to ACEs. Lots of our young people have quite traumatic backgrounds, so we subscribe to the idea that that also adverse child experiences really impair communication and interaction, because they absolutely devastate trust. And epistemic trust is something that's absolutely crucial for healthy development, for all kinds of for developing any kind of pro-social behaviour, but it's also an absolute prerequisite for learning. If young people can't trust you, their ability to learn is significantly diminished, because they can't take risks and they can't move forward, and they get stuck in a loop of only doing the things that are safe, and we can't progress. So that's it. So we think about that in terms of our young people, in terms of how has their trauma impacted on their ability to mentalise themselves and to learn. And we also subscribe to the social model of disability, which is in essence that our young people, we absolutely believe as a core principle that all of our young people can. We don't subscribe to a deficit model. We think about where are their strengths. And again, we use that. That's a mentalising perspective. So mentalising you. What are you good at? Where is our starting point? How can we take that and really build you? Because we believe that actually the issue is not you. The issue is with the environment that you've been in, or it's been with some just silly things like getting changed for PE, which has been, has been a real barrier, but that's not an issue with the young person. That's an environmental issue. And if we remove those barriers, then there is absolutely no reason that our young people can't really move forward and learn to mentalise themselves by having us mentalise them, and really then really connect with their learning and really move forward. So they learn, because we know they need to learn about metacognition, so thinking about their own learning. And if you can't mentalise yourself on a basic emotional level, then thinking about mentalising your own higher order thinking skills is aspirational. So we need to think about, first and foremost, what am I feeling? And we start with, and one of the conversations we had this morning actually was about where in your body are you having this feeling? So we can start to think about where it's happening, so that might help us to understand, to put a name to it. And once we've got a name to it, then we can start thinking about how we manage that and how we make the feeling go away. So that's why AMBIT for Learning, and that's what we're trying to do. And so I think I have waffled on for really quite a long time. I'm going to stop now, because Becky is going to talk about how we did this from the beginning.
So as soon as we knew that we were both going to be opening this unit together, and we knew that we were going to use AMBIT, we used it from the very first day. So before we'd even met any of the young people, we had already used AMBIT in terms of mentalising them just based on the information we knew about them already. So we then planned home visits for all the young people. We planned visits into school, into the unit for all the young people. We met with parents on a weekly basis to ensure that they knew us and we knew them. And there's one example which really sticks out, was we went to visit a young girl who's not been in school, I think for 4 years. And we went to her house and she was hiding up a tree. So she literally climbed to the very top of a tree and was sitting there. And she was saying to her mum, I'm not coming down, I'm not talking to them. They're not going to be able to help me. They don't know anything about me. I'm not doing it. So we just said, okay, fine, we'll just sit on the floor and we'll talk to you up a tree. That's fine. And as we did that for about an hour, she suddenly realised that we did understand her and that she wasn't inaccessible to us. And we said to her, we work for you. When you come to the unit, we work for you. You do not work for us. Whatever you need and however you want to work is fine with us, because our job is to make you feel comfortable. It's not your job to please us. We want you to feel comfortable. And as soon as we said that, her eyes just sort of opened really wide, and she had this massive realization that perhaps someone in the world did understand her. And from doing that mentalization, even then, when she was hiding up a tree, she's now coming, 3 days a week, and she's not been in school for years. And I think doing it from the start, even before we were open, before the building was even built, has just had such a significant impact. And also for the parents to trust us, and for the parents to know, actually, you're not going to give my young child the experience that they've had already. It's going to be a new experience, and the way that you're doing it is going to benefit them, so they then feel more comfortable. which in turn means the young person feels more comfortable. So in mentalising both the parents or the families and the young person from the beginning, it's created, I guess, like a steady path to them joining us, rather than some very rocky road which they were very worried about, because we've been clear from the start what we were doing. Another way we used AMBIT, which might sound a bit weird, but it was in designing the building. So the building that we currently, or that we are in, didn't used to look the way it was. So we had the opportunity to completely redesign it and to make it accessible to our young people. And when so the local authority first sent the plans to us, and they said that they wanted to have 2 separate classrooms that would have, you know, maybe 4 or 5 young people in each. And we fought for months to not have that and to have one big space, because we knew as soon as there's a wall up in the middle of the room, that's a barrier. And for them, that's one barrier that they don't need. And what benefit is that going to bring them? And we fought and fought and fought, and we got our one big space. And it's just so lovely to see how the young people interact with one another, how they interact with us, but they can also see us interacting with one another, which is so important, because they see that we trust one another. And in doing that, they then mentalise us and think, oh, well, if Catherine trusts Becky, Becky must be okay. So then they do. And it's all the tiny little moments every day that build up to enable them to mentalise themselves, to mentalise us, and to mentalise others. We also did communication passports and alertness ladders for each young person before they started. And it was really interesting when we were doing those, because we met with the families and we met with the young people to talk about, you know, what would happen if you were feeling distressed, or what would happen if things were really difficult. And they sort of, the things they said were, well, I'll run away, I'll punch someone, I'll tear down the wall, you won't be able to control me, I'll be absolutely off the scale. And we were like, okay, that's fine. And since we've opened, not a single one of those things has happened, even when the young people have been distressed, because the environment that they're in doesn't allow that, because it's mentalizing every second of every day to constantly think about where the young person is and what do they need in that moment, which is going to be different to the next moment. But because we've done that from the start, before we even opened, that is our culture, and they know that, and parents know that, and the environment has made them, I believe that, or we believe that the environment in terms of what the room looks like, how we've got an outside space, how we've got breakout rooms, how we've got sensory rooms, that has been pivotal in enabling the young people to engage in education. Because the more we look like a school, the less they're going to want to come, because for them, school equals no. But if we don't look like a school, if we look like a warm environment where we all sit around together and we all have lunch and we all go outside, because that isn't their perception of a school, they are engaging more. And yeah, just using AMBIT from the very start has just been so key in getting them here and in getting the young people to want to come, which they all do. And I'm just very glad that we did it from day one. Not that we would have done it any other way, but it just, I can't reiterate how much of a massive impact it's had doing it before we even met them. And then meeting their families and meeting them multiple times, and emailing parents and phoning parents and talking about things that aren't related to the young person, but the parents are sort of, I guess, sussing us out to see if, well, can I actually trust you? Like, you say all this stuff, are you actually going to do it? And because we have done it, they're like, oh, well, it is going to work. And that's because of AMBIT. So we're going to talk about mentalizing ourselves, mentalizing the young people, and how we mentalize ourselves, because that's a massive part of what we do.
We are. So I was thinking about one of the things we talked about, one of the things we mentioned at the beginning of this was curriculum, mentalizing curriculum. So we do it in 2 different ways, and that started again right from the beginning. Right from the very beginning, we sort of gave ownership of the curriculum to the young people. And we said, this will be your curriculum. We are never going to tell you it's time to do maths, it's time to do English, it's time to do this. It's your curriculum, you own this. And actually, I think being a teacher, and certainly having been, I was a teacher I was head of maths in a mainstream secondary school. Well, this secondary school actually for a long time. And the thought of that was so completely alien. But at the same time, what we want to do was we want young people to really engage with their learning and it be for them, not for us. And we want them to be able to mentalize lots of things. So we wanted them to mentalize themselves in the longer term. So what do I want and where do I want to get to and what will I need to get me there? And we also wanted them to mentalize themselves in the short term on a daily basis. So what happened last night? How's that left me feeling? How's my taxi journey been in this morning? What kind of place am I in emotionally? Given everything that I want to achieve, what do I need to do right now? So do I need to have a cup of tea? Do I actually just want to get on with my history? Am I feeling, do you know what, I think I just want to do French all day? Because that's really, really important, because there are no points of conflict then. It's all, and actually people, I guess you could be really, I would completely understand if people thought, well, they'll just say they want to do nothing. But actually, the complete opposite of that is true. If we'd said to them, you've got to do this and you've got to do that, then they would want to do nothing. But because we're not doing that, and we've just said, it's yours. We're here, like Becky said, we'll work for you. Mentalize yourself, and it liberates them. It's given them the freedom to do that. And we'll come on to our successes in a minute, so I'll hold on to that. But yeah, so that's how we mentalize the curriculum. That's part of them mentalizing themselves. But fundamentally, what we really wanted them to do is to like themselves. And that for us comes from mentalizing. Because a lot of the reasons that young people say they don't like themselves, partly, but our young people in particular, because they've had, well, as we said, this disrupted and interrupted kind of relationships and communication process that they haven't had. They've been looking in a cracked mirror. They haven't had a reflection of them from other people that is something likable often. And they also, because they don't necessarily understand their own emotions and feelings, which is the work we're doing, they dislike themselves because they're sort of an enigma or a puzzle to themselves, and things that you don't understand are really scary. So I think we have this cycle of, I don't like myself because I do all these things and I don't really know why, and actually that's really scary. So fundamentally, number one, our key aim is that they learn to like themselves, and that comes from learning to mentalize themselves, because that's about reducing stigma and giving and humanizing themselves. So I feel this and then I do this. Well, that's fine, because you're a human being and that's what human beings do, so that your experiences are not you being different, they're actually you being the same as everybody else, because these are all human experiences. So that's really, really fundamentally how we use mentalizing, really, to help them to like themselves, because until we've got that, until we have, self-acceptance is what we all spend our lives striving for, isn't it? And I'm not saying, we cracked that, boom, self-acceptance was done last Wednesday. But in terms of liking themselves, it starts with understanding themselves and accepting, okay, how am I feeling? And why am I feeling that? And actually, is that okay? So in order for them to like themselves and for us to be able to reflect back to them something, and a vision of someone that's likable, you want to do this? Liking them?
Yes. Yes, so in order for them to like themselves, we need to like them, which of course we do, but even if we are feeling frustrated or we are feeling annoyed internally, we cannot let them know that, because as soon as we look cross or we show a little bit of annoyance, that's going to break the whole relationship, and then it's meaningless. So even if we have things built up inside of us, we need to figure that out for ourselves in order to project back to them. You don't need to be annoyed at yourself because I'm not annoyed at you. And one of the things that me and Catherine work really hard on is mentalizing ourselves in relation to the young people. And we set aside 1 or 2 hours every day after work to do this. And we just sit down and we mentalize our emotional responses to the young people, not necessarily the ones that we projected, but the ones that are still inside of us. And that is why when we go home, we're not thinking, should I have done this? Should I have done this? Why am I feeling like this? What's happening? Because we've structured that time into our day to mentalize the young people. And one example, which was quite a profound moment, was we have a young person working here who is he's got to be right about everything. So you say something's black and he says, no, it's not, it's white. Or you say, my name's Becky, and he says, no, it's not, it's actually something else. He cannot be wrong. And he didn't know, but I was really struggling to engage in a relationship with him, because there was something about him, and I couldn't put my finger on it, but there was something about him which there was a barrier between me liking him, and he didn't know that, but I could feel it, and it was going to show at some point. So I really needed to sort of address it as soon as possible. And we had been, in our time after work, we were talking about this young person, and I was saying, you know, I really struggle with him, and it could be emotional transference. I can't work it out. And then it clicks that the reason I struggled with him so much was because he resembled someone in my family who I no longer talk to. And as soon as it clicks, my whole emotional response to him completely changed, because I had thought about not just how he was perceiving me, but how I was perceiving him, and how I was perceiving myself perceiving him. So not only was I mentalizing him, but I was mentalizing myself. And in doing that, my whole emotional response has completely changed with him. And he doesn't know that, because I act with him the same as I always did. But internally, something really switched. And in doing that, in having that time to mentalize ourselves, it really is what keeps us going, because we can't be working with young people whose needs are this complex, and all they do all day is transfer their emotions constantly, as they should and as they need to. But when that gets tangled up in our emotions, that's when it becomes difficult. So in mentalizing ourselves and in setting aside time every single day to do that, we are keeping everything smooth for us and them. But in doing that, it's then smoother for them, because they are able to mentalize us mentalizing them, so they're getting a better reflection of themselves back from us without our emotions entangled in it. And we both think that having the time to mentalize ourselves really is just so integral to the job we do. And it would be different if if we finished the day and we both went home and mentalized and thought separately. But in having the conversation and talking about it, in understanding, why do you think that happened? What happened when he did this? Why did you feel like that? Those are the moments when you figure things out. And that is just so integral to enabling the young person to feel better about themselves. Because if we're projecting something back to them that they don't like, or that they think is negative, instantly they're going to be like, see, I told you, school's rubbish and teachers are horrible. But actually, if we cap that through mentalization, the relationship is reciprocal between them and between us, and so progress will happen.
I think the other really good thing that does, because it is time intensive, it does take time, but we do, the idea, it's got to be a complete cone of trust between Becky and I, because we're sharing some really deeply personal stuff, and actually we're sharing some feelings that we feel really ashamed of. If I don't immediately like a young person, I feel deeply ashamed of that, and really, as a professional, as a teacher, start beating myself up about how can I feel like this about this young person. And so Becky shared an example of someone that was a trigger for her in terms of her personal life. There was another young person that was a trigger for me in terms of well, it took me quite a long time to get to this. I think Becky's epiphany was far quicker than mine. But I kept struggling every day with this young person, what is it? What is it? What is it? What is it that's bothering me? Why can't I feel the way I want to feel about her? And we finally cracked it when I realized that wasn't a personal trigger, it was professional. I was really worried because she was so damaged by school, and she's only a year 7 and she's already been parent excluded, and she is absolutely anti doing any kind of learning at all. And I was finding that really challenging, because I kept thinking, she's going to bring shame on me. She's going to humiliate me. People are going to come in and say, you're supposed to be this teacher, we're paying you X amount and you get this pension and 6 weeks holiday, and you're supposed to do all this with this child and make progress. She hasn't put pen to paper and it's week 3. And I was getting myself into a state about how she was going to shame me. And actually, it took me quite a long time to get to that. But once I did get to that, I actually felt a huge sense of relief, but also really quite, I thought it was really important to think about, actually as a professional, different ways in which I could reframe that experience for her. So that made me, or in terms of, for me really, in terms of justifying what we're doing. So I started to think about the new Ofsted framework, and really thinking about something that Dickon mentioned at the beginning, which is, in the new Ofsted framework, is this idea of cultural capital. Well, cultural capital consists of emotional capital and social capital. And actually, if we don't build it, and part of the reason for cultural capital being in the new Ofsted framework is it is a huge predictor of life success in terms of career and health and all kinds of things. Because actually, if we don't build our social capital and we don't build our young people's emotional capital, then actually their life trajectory, it doesn't really matter how many GCSEs they get. If they haven't got that, then they can't. The evidence base would say that actually their life chances are really quite limited. So that's how we use, it's a quick run through Becky's and I's dirty laundry. And now onto our last slide, so which is really, what have we achieved? So bearing in mind we're only a few weeks in, but we would say that the success has been, we were terrified at the beginning, because we were all like, yeah, we're going to open up this AMBIT thing and it's going to be great. And then the kids arrived and we were like, oh, this is real. Will it work? And it was nerve-wracking, wasn't it?
Yeah,
but again, we use Mentalising to support each other through that. So do you want to do that?
So I'll just quickly run through what we have seen so far and what we have achieved. So we had a young girl who was a selective mute and who hadn't spoken to an adult who wasn't her dad for years. She's now coming in, chatting with us every day, chatting with peers, asking questions to peers.
She barely laughed yesterday.
Yeah, and it's massive. Our attendance is really good, and I don't mean that in terms of we have good figures, because who really cares, but in terms of that the young people want to come. So when the young people are ill and their parents call in the morning and say, oh, blah blah's feeling ill, but he really wants to be there and he's sad he can't be there, that's key. We have had quite a reduction in anxiety around coming to school. So the transition from home to school at the start was what was worrying a lot of them. So they were either getting a taxi or getting in the car, and for them having that change was huge. And the mornings have just been really plain sailing. They rock up, they're smiling, they're talking to one another, they do some well-being for half an hour, and they're good to go. The emotional regulation is a big one in terms of just how much the young people have changed, in terms of they now understand some of the things that they're feeling and why they might be feeling them. And it's a massive part of what we do. It's not, we do focus on curriculum, but we also spend hours every day, every second of every day, encouraging them and supporting them to regulate themselves, and for them to know if they're doing work and they get stressed out, it's fine to go and kick a football around for 5 minutes. Dickens just said 5 more minutes, so I'll be...
He's on mute, sorry.
Yeah, Dickens on mute. I'm not sure what he's saying, but I'll just carry on. I'll be quick.
Sorry. Yeah, just we've got a few minutes. There are a few questions that people are putting in the thing that I'd just like to kind of put to you quickly. But
okay.
But this has been great. Sorry to be annoying.
No, not at all. I'll just read through them and not explain them. So the other thing we've seen is massive social interactions and peer relationships. Also, relationships with us are improving massively, and the young people are effectively saying, like, you guys are really good, and I never thought that we would see people, or we would be able to work with people like you who would actually do what you said you were going to do. The families, their relationships are improving. We've got young people who used to storm home from school and walk straight to their rooms and not talk to anyone, and now they're going home, having dinner with their families and giving their mums a hug. They're talking more positively about themselves. We are feeling better about ourselves because we are mentalising, and the young people are engaged in their education.
Wow. I feel really cruel asking you to stop, because I want you to keep telling us more. It's been the most incredible. People of various comments have sort of commented on how infectious your enthusiasm is. There are one or two quite specific questions. One of which is, what helped you to design this space that you fought so hard for? Was it based on previous experience, theory, young people's opinions? How did you kind of construct the argument for a large room rather than small rooms?
All three of those things. So predominantly the environment that we had at the Darwin actually was, we changed the environment at the Darwin to be everybody sitting around at one table, but we did also have the luxury of having the breakout rooms. The space that we had at the Darwin was just, it came like that, and we just made the most of it. But what we could see was the benefit of young people being able to be together, but also being able to be separate. And as soon as you have just two classrooms, you lose that flexibility. And if our predominant, what we're trying to do is self-regulation, then you need an environment that supports that. Because there's no point saying to someone, we want you to learn to self-regulate, but you have to do it in the classroom in front of everybody else. Yeah. And also it was about young people's opinions. Actually, the young people had said, yeah, we would quite like to be able to work on our own if we want to. But also about knowing a little bit about autism and about the difficulties of transition. And also really just the AMBIT idea of barriers, removing, I mean, in quite a literal sense, removing barriers.
Yeah,
more space instead of
the sort of father of mentalising in its use in therapy, Peter Fonagy, he certainly sort of, some of his recent statements are suggesting that he sees the group process as being the most powerful kind of teaching aid, if you like, to learn mentalising. There's just a couple of other questions that I want to just quickly ask, and because I'm aware of the fact that we are sort of up against the end of the session. Do you use animals or pets? Certainly in my work, we do use pets as therapists. They're incredibly good. Young people are much better at mentalising dogs than they are about mentalising humans often, because they're not so threatening. But what do you use them in the school?
So we currently don't have a pat dog due to COVID, but we do have therapy guinea pigs who live in the unit. So we have 2 guinea pigs and they're there every day. The young people help clean them out. They talk to them, they cuddle them.
And the mentalising capacity of guinea pigs?
fantastic.
Pretty good.
Amazing. I mean, yeah. Anyway, and then there's a really helpful question from Gwyneth. I love the idea of students having control of their own curriculum and learning. How is this managed and still ensuring access to a high quality curriculum with high quality specialist teaching? I do think this approach requires very small groups. Am I correct in thinking you have 4 students to 1 teacher ratio?
So I'm a teacher. We have 8 young people. I'm the only teacher. The idea is that they would be able, some of them that were able to, would be able to go and access specific specialist subjects in the mainstream school. So, for example, design technology, which I can't teach, and it does require specialist teaching. However, I've been teaching for quite a long time, and at the Darwin I taught an awful lot of different things. So I teach most things, and then on top of that, the idea is that would then be subsidised by buying in subject specialists to top up and just provide that really additional kind of guidance and steering for our young people in terms of curriculum. But I guess the way that we justify that, and the way that because I understand that, in an ideal world, everyone would be taught by subject specialists. However, they could be taught by subject specialists, but they don't have the relationship with the subject specialist, they're not going to learn anything. So it's the argument is, well, actually, we've got the relationship, and because that is so profound and so strong, actually from that we can really build anything, because they're so open to, you know, going to find stuff out and, you know, and do a bit more kind of self-directed learning. But yes, but we do also subsidize with subject specialists.
And I suppose, Catherine, that one of the things that you are modelling to your students is your relationship to the subject specialists, which is one of help, that they might come and help you with resources, with sort of techniques, and indeed occasionally come in person too. But if you like, you're modelling to your pupils that help seeking is not something that runs out when you kind of achieve adulthood.
No, good grief, no.
That adults are rather better at help seeking than many young people.
Well, in terms of our language, so we're really conscious of our language all the time as well. And so one of the things that we do a huge amount of is thanking the young people, asking the young people for help, and then really acknowledging that they, you know, oh, well, we really didn't understand that, and we really didn't know how to do that, and thank you, you've shown us, and letting them do things that we obviously can do. You know, we let them think that, you know, that we can't, and letting them be the experts. But what the line we always hold is, you are the expert in you. And that's really
perfect place to come to an end, and to kind of punish both Catherine and Becky for, she's actually kept the class late, but I don't think any of the class have left. And given that it's Zoom, I think that's
voluntary detention.
We're hugely grateful to you for coming and sharing that experience. It's inspiring. You know, Catherine, you're an extremely inspiring teacher, and Becky, thank you for coming too. And sort of the sort of conversation particularly that caught my mind was the way that the two of you work as what we would call a well-connected team. That this is critical. You can't do this work as a ninja lone ranger. You've got to have other minds keeping your mind going. This is not for solo voyagers. We're hugely grateful to everyone who's come. I know that the head of your marvellous school, Newmarket Academy, Nick Froy's in the audience. I think he was kind of not able to come and present here, but it'd be lovely to hear, perhaps at another date we can get you back, because I think how a kind of an organisation that has incredibly clear kind of requirements kind of makes an capacity, and if you like, accommodates an approach like this is, I think, going to be of huge influence and interest to other people. And I guess it's you know, that I think that'll be another whole webinar possibly, just to talk about, you know, how does this work? Because it's, you know, I think the only risk for this from this talk is that you make it look so easy, and I know it's not. But perhaps we could talk about how hard it is, another one. But I mean, it's just been great. Thank you so much for
thank you for having us,
for coming along. And yeah, if you'll consent to us trying to come and ask you to come back, maybe we could get Nick to come too, and we could hear kind of how, you know, how a mainstream school accommodates a service like this within. And I think, you know, that's, again, in terms of inclusion, just a completely fantastic thing. So thank you to all of those who came along, and go and have an evening, get a life, and thank you, Catherine and Becky, very much indeed for totally inspiring. I feel you know, I'm going to have to go and take some kind of sedative. Calm down now. It's very exciting. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having us. Thank you.
All the best.